Gentlemen, it's me, Phil Kerpen. I'm hoping to chat with you a little bit about our friend, the Internet czar, Susan Crawford. I only have a few minutes with you, unfortunately, because I'm out with my wife right now, but I did want to call in because you guys are doing phenomenal work of showing who she is and some of the connections on that.
Well, your friend, the Internet czar, and I wanted to emphasize your friend. She lives closer to you, by the way, Phil, right now. But she's got some very nice friends herself, including Mr. What is his name, Paul? The gentleman whose video you just discovered.
Mcchesney?
Yes.
Did you hear that audio yet, Phil?
Robert Mcchesney, yeah, I listened to the clip that you sent, and I actually watched a lot of that program, and it was interesting because he was kind of careful not to just say outright that he wants socialism, but he sort of said we need to get rid of this evil system of corporate control and have a more democratic allocation of the media and of the means of production and so on. So it's pretty classically, left-wing, hardcore, anti-capitalist type stuff, and that is now the mentality that's driving so many areas of federal policy, and in particular, regulatory policy for the broadcast space as well as for the Internet.
Yeah, and you're all over that as well, Phil. You've been tracking some of these guys. I understand you're going to be on Glenn possibly sometime next week, so we look forward to that. Talking about what's going on with these. Go ahead, Paul.
I said, if you're not on, Phil, we will mutiny.
I hope they do the segment because there's a lot more to it than just the brief introduction to Mcchesney that they had on Wednesday. And he really hasn't done anything about Crawford yet, who Wired magazine called the geek closest to the president, and who I think is driving a lot of technology policy right now in a very radical direction. And I think it's pretty clear that people like Crawford and Mcchesney understand that the policies they favor will completely destroy private investment in the Internet, and they don't care because they think it ought to be run by government-owned, government-controlled, and they're perfectly comfortable with that. I think the vast majority of Americans are not. So we're going to push this story and try to expose what's going on and stop it. And you guys have been a big part of that. It was actually from your blog posts and tweets that I found out a lot of this information, so I absolutely appreciate what you guys are doing.
Well, we'll stay on it, and we'll continue to track these folks. We've actually just got a whole bunch of new information sent to us from a source who chose not to be named, but we're backtracking the information, checking everything out, making sure that it's legit because, we have to make sure that this stuff was legit before we put it out. But lots of very interesting, and when I say interesting, of course, I mean appalling and somewhat terrorizing at times. Through, what these folks are up to. Do they honestly think, though, and this is the question, and maybe not so much for you, Phil, but maybe you can have a stab at it. Do they honestly think that if they tried to outlaw the Internet, like the Iranian government tried to do, that they would actually succeed? Well,
I think that you couldn't outright regulate the Internet for content the way it's structured right now because it's so decentralized and, the regulations would be fairly easy to get around. And I think that's why the regulations that they're pursuing are not content regulations, they're economic regulations. They're trying to first destroy the business model that underlies the Internet as it exists now with privately owned and controlled networks. Once that business model is destroyed and you've chased away all the private investment, you have the government come in, use tax dollars, get explicit ownership and control, and I think then it becomes much more possible to implement content restrictions, and I think we would inevitably see calls for them because they would then use the rationale, this is a taxpayer-funded network, it shouldn't have such outrageous falsehoods and so on. And if you look at the proposal that Cass Sunstein has in his forthcoming book about having Internet truth courts, you can see that people in this administration are absolutely willing to take it to that next level of content restriction. So as it stands now, I think content restriction would be very, very difficult. I think that's why they're trying to have economic regulation first, which will then lay the groundwork for content restriction in the future.
Well, Phil, they're going a little bit further, if I'm reading this right, than just economic restrictions. They're looking at regulating the protocols themselves of the Internet.
That's right. I mean, it's from a technical from an engineering standpoint, what they're talking about is sheer nonsense, and I think it's designed to destroy these networks and replace them with something different and much more government control.
So the proof in the pudding comes from Robert Mcchesney. Back in 1997, they were bemoaning the broadband don't have enough broadband for everyone, so I guess we're going to have to limit it for everyone else. They were doing that in 97. What has happened since 97? Bandwidth is not nearly the issue that it once was. It's
well, not just that, but now they push the exact opposite. Now it's bandwidth. Now broadband internet is an entitlement that must be provided to the whole world, according to Susan Crawford's One Web Day project, and that's why it's just so important we can't leave it to the market. So, when your agenda is to destroy private control and replace it with government control, it will shift with the times, and I think it's become the exact opposite of what it was a decade ago.